everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today here on the channel, we're going to be talking about 1960s Breathless and its brand new 4K Blu-ray that just came out from the Criterion collection. So Breathless is one of the most influential films of all time. It's one of the most important films ever made. It's really one of the leaders in the new wave movement, one of the most important times in film history from the late 1950s through the 1960s. It's kind of where film really changed its game. This film is probably most known for its use of jump cuts, something that wasn't really being done at the time. Coming off the 1950s and the studio system and what those movies look like, this is something that's actually influenced by American filmmaking. Jean-Luc Godard himself is a huge fan of American film, and he decided to implement a lot of stuff that they were doing there and put it into his film, his directorial debut film. You know, he was a film critic before he did this, and he put a lot of that in his movie as well. And that's what makes this movie still feel fresh to this day. Does it hold up as well as you would think? It definitely feels dated. It definitely feels like something you have seen before, and that's because a lot of movies that come out today still take their influence from Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless, especially Richard Linklater and the Before trilogy or Waking Life, because this movie also deals a lot with philosophical thoughts, existentialism, all that is in here. I don't think it's done as well as like another director who was working big at the time, Ingmar Bergman. Ingmar Bergman really was diving into philosophical thoughts in almost all of his movies. Look at The Seventh Seal and Persona. Now, Jean-Luc Godard puts that in this film as well. It's also very much a straightforward thriller. At the beginning of this movie, our main character, Michel, played by John Paul Belmondo, we see him just driving on the countryside, acting wild, speeding past cars. Then the cops notice him, and what does he do? He pulls over to the side of the road, a cop catches up to him, and he shoots and kills the cop, and then he heads out on his own back to Paris, and he meets up with an American journalist student handing out papers, trying to sell papers, and she's played by Jean Seberg. And these two characters are the leads in this movie. It's really about their relationship. She doesn't know what he has done, so they're just kind of, talking normally. They've talked a couple times in the past before this. They've had a relationship. This movie really does just take place over the course of one day, so we don't really know too much that happened before this. So we're really getting that stuff all unwound for us as the movie progresses on. We get to see a little bit more of Michel's life and how he operates, and I can't figure out for the life of me what Jean Seberg sees in this man, because he's just a terrible guy in my opinion. The whole movie I'm rooting for this guy to get caught because I don't like him. He's just not a nice person. He treats her terrible. He treats every woman in his life that he sees terribly. We see him with another girl, and she offers to give him money after he asks for money. He asks for about 5,000 francs, I think, and she's like, I don't got that. She's like, I'll give you what I got though, and he's like, no, I don't want it. But as she turns her back, he steals it from her anyway. So you're trying to figure out what this guy's way is of life. It seems like it's just to cause chaos. He seems like a sociopath, a narcissist in my opinion. Seems like he's only really out there for himself, but he does seem to love Jean Seberg, which is really fascinating because she seems to really love him as well, which makes the confliction for her very hard because she doesn't know exactly what to do. Does she turn this guy in? There's also the possibility that she's pregnant with his child, but she knows deep down that this guy is not good for her, and the only way to really get rid of him is to turn him into the police. He's very confident in himself. That's one thing about him. He feels like what he's doing is the right thing. He's just floating through life, living it the way he wants. And then she herself is dealing with depression. She's not really the most happy person, and she's trying to escape reality as well. So maybe that's why she attaches herself to somebody like this overly confident guy, this suave guy influenced by Humphrey Bogart. He's always there smoking the cigarette like him. He thinks he's just as cool as Humphrey Bogart. I'm guessing that's his hero. He models his whole look and life around that guy, but he's not really living in the real world himself. He's just living the life that he imagines he should be living, but he doesn't realize what that is doing to other people around him. He's treating people just, like I said, awful. There's a scene in this movie where he gets out of the car and just lifts up a girl's dress. That's probably just, something of the time and the French culture and everything like that, but I would think as a girl that it's with him, that's pretty rude. I'm right here, especially since I'm possibly the mother of your unborn child. So looking at it from a story standpoint, I can't figure out exactly why she would be attached to him. That's just somebody I would have no attachment to. I'd be like, you know what? You got to get your comeuppance because you're just acting like a crazy person, and I can't be around that. And luckily, by the end of this movie, she does come to her senses, and she does eventually turn him in. But that doesn't really tell the whole story of this movie. Yes, it's just a straightforward thriller with a man on the run. You're wondering if the cops are going to eventually catch up to him. You're wondering if everything is going to come to a head, and of course it does. But who is the hero of this movie? We are really operating in the gray area. The heroes, do they win? Quinn, because these are the protagonists that we're following in this movie. Does she escape him, or is she going to be haunted by this her entire life? And then just the shots in this movie, that's the stuff that is just beautiful. A lot of handheld camera, the transitions, and that's the stuff that still stands the test of time, is the way this movie's shot, and that's what's influenced other directors, and you could just see the influence it has on other directors, and I think that's exactly what has stood the test of time. You know, it might not hold up as well as modern day films, but if you're a film fan, a cinephile, these are one of those movies that you have to see, and that's why I went out of my way to make sure I saw it, because it is one of those movies that everyone says you have to see. It's always ranked very high on the Sight and Sound list. It's considered one of the most important films ever. So if you are a fan of movies and a fan of classic cinema, this is definitely one you're going to want to see. Your mileage may range on the entertainment value from it, but it's definitely something that is very important, and I can recommend it from that standpoint.
New York Herald Tribune.
Attention.
But the reason why we've all gathered here today is to talk about Breathless on 4K from the Criterion Collection. And this is actually number 408. It was originally released by the Criterion Collection on DVD in 2007, then on Blu-ray in 2010, and now it's come to 4K Blu-ray. And the 4K scan was actually originally done in 2020 by Studio Canal, and now the Criterion Collection has took that scan and they've applied HDR10 and Dolby Vision to it. So if you have that previous scan, you just have it without Dolby Vision and HDR10, and here in America we have it now released here with this 4K scan, and then you also have a Region 8 Blu-ray packed in there. So you get this beautiful packaging, which I really do love. You get the Digibook packaging. I'm really glad that they sprung for all the bells and whistles when it comes to its packaging. You take it out, and again, great packaging just all around. That's something I really hope the Criterion Collection always does. So for the most part, their packaging is top shelf. The only real flaw I've ever seen in their packaging is their Citizen Kane 4K. I just have no idea what they were thinking with that. Again, one of the most important films ever made like this movie, so I would have preferred Citizen Kane in this Digibook packaging, but we did not get that. You open it up, there's your two discs. You get some great reading material right here. Again, good paper stock, thick paper stock, stuff that's going to last the test of time, stuff that's not going to get ripped and faded and turn yellow and all that. I mean, it might still turn yellow. What do I know about that? So anyway, it's just great paper. That's the point that I'm getting at here. You go inside, again, there's your Blu-ray disc, your 4K disc, individual disc design. Really appreciate that. The colors are awesome. Definitely love the packaging with this one. On that first disc, you're going to get the 4K. You're going to get no extras on there. You don't have your choice of audio track. It's only one audio track on here. It's a 1.0. It's nothing special, but it is perfect for this film. Again, it's a 1960 film. As long as it sounds crisp and clear, and it does, no pops, nothing. I didn't hear any issues, any hissing. They really cleaned up the audio. It's almost perfect. Again, it's a French film, so it's going to be, if you don't speak that language, you're going to have to read subtitles. And the subtitles are all good. And actually, speaking of the ending of this movie, the subtitles have been kind of changed through the years as the interpretation of French. So certain aspects might look different from previous versions of this movies depending on which version you've seen, but the Criterion Collection has always had, I believe, actually I think they changed it for the 2010 Blu-ray release. The very last line in the movie is the one that really gets talked about a lot as being interpreted different. It gets interpreted different in France, and then it does here in America. The ending of this movie is supposed to be ambiguous, but they kind of leave it direct for the American audience, and that's just stuff that gets lost in translation. So just be aware of that going in. If you want to look up the ending of this movie and its interpretations, I recommend doing that. They do that also in the extras on this, which are all going to be on that Blu-ray disc, which is the previous 2010 Blu-ray. So you get no new extras on here, but there are so many of them. You get old interviews with Jean-Luc Godard. You get 2 video essays on here talking about the influence of the film, talking about their interpretations of the film, how film criticism was intertwined into this movie because Jean-Luc Godard himself was a film critic. So all that stuff is fascinating. There's plenty of stuff to read in here. I mean, the extras, that's something that Criterion has always done perfectly. Now, you get no new extras, so the only thing you're getting in here if you have that previous Blu-ray release is this new 4K. And is it worth it for that? I think so. In comparing the Blu-ray and the 4K is just so much brighter than the previous Blu-ray. And that could be the HDR10 and the Dolby Vision. I can't compare this to the Studio Canal 4K that came out in 2020. So I'm very curious to see how much the HDR and the Dolby Vision improved on that previous scan. But the resolution increase is noticeable. You know, the grain gets cleaned up so well. It's still got a nice layer of grain, but it's not an overwhelming amount of grain. It might seem a little bit overwhelming in the Blu-ray. The Blu-ray is also a little bit unsteady, kind of bouncing between the blacks and grays. There's like scenes where that on the 4K, the blacks are much much deeper than on the Blu-ray. The whole scene might just look like a little bit muddy and a little bit faded, and we're not hitting those deep blacks, we're just kind of hitting all these grays, and the scene just might not look as beautiful as it does on the 4K. This really is a great 4K scan, and then I think the Dolby Vision and HDR10 are doing great work in making it look brighter, making the contrast ratio look better. Again, I haven't seen that Studio Canal 4K, so I'm really curious to see how much of it was actually done in the restoration and how much of it is actually improved with the Dolby Vision and the HDR10. But it is definitely a jump from that Blu-ray to this 4K. So if you were wondering about it and you're a fan of this movie and you have that previous Blu-ray and all you're going to be getting here is this upgrade to 4K, I still think it's worth it because it is definitely a noticeable improvement on this 4K, and it's probably one of the better looking black and white 4Ks that have ever come out. I think it's actually better than what Criterion did with the Citizen Kane 4K, which is also in black and white. It is also a great restoration, but this one I think might actually be a little bit better and is up there in movies what I think have some of the best 4K transfers in black and white, like Touch of Evil, The Killing, and Paths of Glory. I think those are like the top three when it comes to, and those are all actually from Kino Lorber, but this one is definitely high on that list as well. It's one you probably should see, and right now this is on sale until July 28th on through Barnes & Noble. That's actually how I bought this, the 50% off sale, and I think it's like $28, and that's a steal for this, especially if you don't own it. Now, if you already own it and you just have this movie to have in your collection and you're not a big fan of it and you don't feel the need to upgrade, I can understand that as well. It's probably not one that I'm going to be running back to all the time, but I will definitely be checking this out a couple more times because I did enjoy the film and I do love analyzing film, and there's so much to analyze in here. I know I haven't even tackled the surface level of everything that's in this movie, so I'll definitely be checking this out again, doing some more research on it. I really did enjoy my time with it. It definitely was a good watch, and it's only 90 minutes, so it's nothing offensive as far as taking up your time. With modern movies being anywhere from like 2.5 to 3 hours, it's nice to have a 90-minute movie in there sometimes, and one like this that moves along at such a brisk pace thanks to the great transitions and just great pacing in this movie. You're never bored with it, so that's something I could definitely say is also great about this film. So what would I give this entire 4K package at a score of 1 to 10? I would actually give this a really solid 9 out of 10. It's a great Criterion release, but again, buying this is going to come down to how do you feel about the film? Do you already have a previous DVD or Blu-ray release? Do you feel like you're going to run back and check it out? It really is going to come down to you, and if you feel like you want to upgrade it, I can definitely recommend the 4K disc itself. It is definitely an upgrade over that previous Blu-ray, so you won't be disappointed with the transfer. But if you have the 4K from Studio Canal, it might be a little bit harder for me to say because it is the same exact scan, just with Dolby Vision and HDR10. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for being here with me on another episode of Let's Talk. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and then after you're done doing all that, get out in those streets. Maybe you are in France and you want to get out in those streets, and tell all your friends about us. We'll be seeing you around.